Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. We are now here to discuss the AIMS capsule course, okay, for the subject of PSM. Yes, and I have just named it as the surgical stride 3.0 because you know the pattern of questions in AIMS has changed, okay. So we would be giving you an insight into the pattern of questions as well, okay, in the upcoming AIMS CBT and in the AIMS mock exam. Yes, but here I would be basically discussing on the important topics which is very specific to AIMS. This is in addition to your routine class notes, okay. So you cannot replace your class notes. This is definitely in addition to it, okay. So this is being basically brought to you by both me and Rajiv sir together. Yes, okay. So it's like a surgical strike. One of us is speaking it out, but it's the entire team which is going to present for you, okay. Now the objective of this particular session is to cover some important topics, yes, which are only of the AIMS pattern of questions or AIMS standards, okay. So I would not be looking exactly into the new pattern. I'm going to try to give you the concepts. That is what I'm looking into this particular session into, okay. Now, so we have got 8 topics which we would be covering over here. So let us see one by one, okay. So the first topic would be on the cutoffs and the ROC curves. Yes, so let us understand over here what do I mean by cutoffs and the ROC curve. Yes, okay. So let us first look into the cutoffs. Now, any blood parameter in our setup, there is always a gray zone, what is abnormal and what is normal. So generally there is a very good degree of overlap which is seen in majority of the blood parameters. Yes, and that creates a major confusion. Yes, so suppose this is the normal population of people, whereas this is the abnormal or the diseased population. This is the abnormal or the diseased population over here. Okay, now I take a cutoff over here, okay. Suppose this is for blood sugars. I am explaining you for blood sugars, and the normal sugar ranges from 60 to 120. I am assuming it, and the abnormal ranges from 100 to 200. Yes, 100 to 200. Now suppose I have taken a cutoff of 110. Now look over here. This circle over here is actually a normal person, but has been labeled as diseased. This person is called as false positive. This person is called as false positive. Whereas this X, who is actually a diseased person, because his sugar is less than the cutoff, has been labeled as normal. So he is the false negative person over here. Okay. This was a very common NEET question in 2016 and 17. They used to put this diagram, label as A and B, and they used to ask what is A and what is B. They used to ask us this. Now AIMS will go a step up. AIMS will say, suppose I increase the cutoff to 115 or I lower the cutoff to 110. What will happen to the number of false positives and negatives? So if I take it to 115, you can see the number of false positives going down, whereas the number of false negatives going up. In this case, the number of false positives will go up, whereas number of false negatives would come down. Yes? Now comes the question, which cutoff should I take? Should I take the cutoff? Sorry, I would again make a correction over here. This is actually 105. Yes? So, should I take a cutoff of 105 or 1110 or 1115? That is my question. Now to solve this, we draw something which is called as a ROC. Now ROC stands for receiver operator curve. Now this curve is basically used to tell us about cutoffs or threshold. So it tells you what should be the cutoff or the threshold for any particular test. Okay. Now why it is called ROC? Because this was very first time used in defense for the purpose of communication. That's the reason receiver, operator, and they used to draw a curve. Yes. Now, never has been asked in AIIMS the curve itself, but they have already come to the asking that what is the use of ROC. So the next question which we predict is they would give you the curve to interpret. Now this curve on the x-axis we have sensitivity, and on the y-axis we have 1 minus specificity. Now this is the start point, which is 0 0 coordinate, 0 0 coordinate. Over here sensitivity is 0, 1 minus specificity is 0, therefore specificity is 1. Therefore specificity is 1. Now, if I come over here at this point, sensitivity is 1, 1 minus specificity is 1, therefore specificity is 0. So my dear students, this line is called as the baseline. Now see the uniqueness of this line. On this line, over here at the start sensitivity was 0, over here the sensitivity was 1, over here specificity was 1, over here the specificity is 0. And this is what defines this equation. Sensitivity is inversely proportional to 1 minus specificity. Sensitivity is inversely proportional to 1 minus specificity. Yes? Okay. Now look over here. This is one point where the sensitivity is 1 and 1 minus specificity is 0. Therefore specificity is 1. This point, my dear friends, is called as the idealistic point. Now what is the importance of this point? This is a theoretical point where the sensitivity and specificity both are 1. Practically it is never ever possible to get a sensitivity and specificity both 1. Okay, so this is a very very important understanding we need to have. Okay, now this structure which now I have drawn is the skeleton of the ROC curve. This is the skeleton or the framework. Now in the previous page I had told you 3 cutoffs, 105, 1110, 115. Now in the population we draw cutoffs over here. In the population we draw some cutoff lines, something like this, when we will take different cutoffs. Yes. Okay. Now suppose this is A, this is B, this is C. Yes, corresponds to 105, 115, 110, whatever it be. Now how to interpret this curve? It is very simple. The line which is closest to the idealistic point is the best cutoff. What did I say? The line closest to idealistic point is best cutoff, is the best cutoff. Okay, now what can be the questions over here? You can get questions on the labelings. At the start point, what is the sensitivity and specificity? Over here, what is the sensitivity specificity? Over here, what is the sensitivity specificity? Or they can give you the curve and they can ask you to interpret which particular cutoff is best. So in this diagram it is C more than B more than A, C more than B more than A. Yes. Now these are theoretical. Now let us look how AIIMS will portray you this question. Now in this question they have given you a question and you need to interpret the diagram. Okay, let us see. So they say there's a virulent bacterial infection which has 80% fatality if it is not identified early, but a prompt administration of antibiotic decreases the mortality to less than 5. So if you give antibiotic, it reduces to less than 5. Now the risk of this therapy is minimum. Which of the following labeled points is the most appropriate for use as an optimal diagnostic cutoff point? Yes. So we want an optimal diagnostic cutoff point to start the treatment. Yes. Okay. So let us see. Now over here, they have not labeled the Y and X axis. Now you cannot ask the examiner, okay, tell us what is Y and what is X in the exam. So we have to interpret as per what is given. Okay. Now, suppose I see over here that this particular line is the non-infected one, whereas the red line is the infected one. So if I take the cutoff at 6, you can see the entire population would be suffering from disease and they would die. So 6 is not a good cutoff. If I take a cutoff 5, then also I can see almost 70% of population is getting affected. If I take a cutoff roughly 3.5, still 40% people will be affected. So my cutoff which suits is either 2 or 1. Now, which is the better one? Now see, at 1, the infection is not starting at all. They are normal people. Now this is not a preventive therapy. So my best cutoff for this answer would have been option number 2. Now imagine the examiner would have asked for a vaccine. Then my answer would have been 1. Yes. Suppose the examiner would have said it is diabetes mellitus. My preferred cutoff would be roughly 3.5 or 4. Because in diabetes there is not excessive mortality, there is not excessive morbidity. Yes. Now imagine the examiner would have said common cold. Then my cutoff would have been 6. Because common cold is a self-limiting illness. Yes, I hope you know it. There is no death and no severe morbidity. They say if you treat common cold, you will be perfectly fine in 7 days. If you don't, you'll be perfectly fine in a week. Yes, done. Now they can also ask you, suppose the drug would have high side effects, but it is preventing mortality. In such cases, we give the choice to the patient. What does he want to do? Yes, what does he want to do with himself? Whether he want to consume the drug or he does not want to consume the drug. Yes. So this is the end of the first concept. Yes, important. Please get your concepts and basics right. Let us now go to the second concept over here, matching. Now this is important for the NEET exam also, but the type of question would be different. NEET will ask you theoretical. So what is the definition? It is the process of selecting controls so that they are similar to cases with regards to certain variables. Now, this is basically preferred to be done in a case control study because the function of this typically is it removes known confounders. Now, what is confounder? We will see in the later part of this video. For now, remember confounders refers to confusers. So it eliminates the known confusers. But you should be very careful about one thing, my dear students, that is overmatching. We should never ever match for variable of interest, as we would never be able to get a statistical data out of it. Yes. Now this is theory. NEET would ask this much and would be happy. AIIMS would give you scenarios. Now let us look over here. Over here, I have got a research question. Yes. Where I am looking into the assessment of height of a girl and post 30 years osteoporosis. I have two girls. Both are 25 years of age. One is 155 centimeter. The other is 160 centimeter. The expected osteoporosis will be more in the girl too. This is what I expect because we know the taller a person is, more is the osteoporosis. Yes, more is the osteoporosis. But when I actually did the research, I found out that the girl one is having more degree of osteoporosis. Now the question came, why so? Why did this happen? Yes. So we saw over here and we took the history again. Now when I took the history, I found that the girl one is a vegan and does not consume milk at all. Whereas the girl 2 is a non-vegetarian and also consumes milk. Now this means the girl 1 does not have calcium in her diet. And calcium, you know, is what is a basic etiology for osteoporosis. Calcium deficiency is one of the major causes for osteoporosis. Yes. So this is a typical condition of undermatched because we matched only for the age. We matched only for the age. So AIIMS would give you such a scenario and say whether it is undermatched or unmatched. So you have to be very careful that age has been matched. So it is undermatched. Now look over here. So now comes an adequate degree of matching. Yes. So now I take a girl 3. Both of them are 25 years old. Both of them are vegans and both of them consume milk. Girl 3 would have more osteoporosis because the height of the girl 3 is more. So she would have more osteoporosis. So this refers to appropriate degree of matching. Appropriate degree of matching. Yes. Okay. Now, what is overmatching? Now, in this question, I was trying to know the effect of height and osteoporosis, because my hypothesis was the taller a person is, the taller the person is, more is the degree of osteoporosis. So I took a 25-year-old girl who are vegan, does not consume milk, but I took both of them to be 155 centimeter. So now I can see that I would not get any result. This is what is called as overmatching. So my dear friends, AIIMS would give you such scenarios and expect you to pick up whether it is unmatched, adequately matched, overmatched, or undermatched. So 4 options, you should be ready for it. Yes, fine, done, okay. So question, the use of matching as a technique for control of confounding is the most appropriate for? The answer is case control. We never ever do in cross-sectional, because in cross-sectional there is no comparison group. Clinical trial, we have randomization, which is a far better method than matching, because randomization removes both known and unknown confounder. Large scale cohort, generally not preferred. As such, cohort is a very costly study. If you put in matching, there would be more amount of cost would be introduced into it. Yes, done, over, okay. Now, advanced cohort studies, the third topic of the series. These are case control studies which are based in a defined cohort. Now, this statement itself is an MCQ. They are case control study which is embedded in a cohort. So always remember, they are predominantly cohort due to a forward direction, predominant cohorts. Now, what are the advantages? There is no recall bias, which is a typical bias associated with case control study design. The temporality is maintained. In case of a cohort, the temporality is there, which makes it a very superior study as compared to case control, ecological, cross-sectional. Yes, that is maintained. Economical. This can be done for rare diseases or whose diagnostic tests are very expensive. Now remember, routinely we cannot do cohorts for rare outcomes. Cohorts are very costly. You need to follow up them for a very, very long time. It is practically not possible. Yes. Greater comparability, because both the case and control come from the same cohort, which means there is a natural matching which has happened. So the problem of confounding also goes away. Yes, but there is a slight disadvantages. Sometimes they might not be representative of the original population. They might not be representative of the original population. So sometimes the generalization of results, that is internal validity, is questionable sometimes. Yes, okay. So let me make your life simple by telling there are 2 types of study in advanced cohort. One is a nested case control, one is a case cohort. Now please remember just one statement. Controls assigned at same time, controls assigned at same time, controls assigned at last. In a nested case control study, the controls are assigned at the same time when cases occur. Case 1, control 1. Case 2, control 2. Case 3 and 4, control 3 and 4. But in case of a case cohort, we are assigning the controls at the last. We are assigning the controls at the last. You can see at the bottom the controls are there. Yes. So this is the very basic difference between these two. This is the very basic difference between these two. Yes. Okay. Now, so in a nested case control, a typical word which would be used by AIIMS is matched for time of follow-up. In a nested case control, they are matched for the time of follow-up. Yes, you could see at the same time the controls are being assigned as cases. So if a case is followed for a year, the control is also followed for a year. If a case is followed for 3 years, the control is also followed for 3 years. Yes, done? Okay. Now, so let us look into this question. A cohort of healthy individuals at risk of developing a disease were chosen and followed over a period of 5 years. During this time, 5 cases come up. 1 case after 1 year, 1 case after 2 years, 2 after 4, and 1 after 5. Each time a case or case developed, the same number of controls were chosen from the same cohort. That means the moment there is a case, you are taking a control. So this is a nested case control study. This is a nested case control study. Yes, done? Yes. So now let us look into the next topic, the survival curves. Yes. Now survival curve is called as the Kaplan-Meier curve. You see this curve in patho, ENT, ophtha, medicine, surgery, OBGY, pediatrics, any cancers, you will see this. Now, AIIMS might ask you this question to interpret this curve. Now, interpreting this curve is very simple. If you have just listened to this 3 minutes or 4 minutes of video, nothing more than that. Yes? Okay. So let us see. Now, this is time in years. This is suppose survival probability or number of patients, let me tell you. So suppose 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So all of you know, generally we read survivals for 5 years. Yes. Now suppose at the start there were 100 patients. First year 20 died. Next year 30 died. Next year 20 died. Next year 20 died. The last year everyone was dead. So what are the questions which can be asked from here? The first question, how much is the 5-year survival? So you can see the 5-year survival is 0. The 5-year survival is 0. Yes, because no one is alive at the end of 5 years. The second question, maximum deaths. You can see the maximum deaths have occurred in over here in the second year. So this is second year. The third, you can see 50% of people are alive at the end of second year. This is called as median survival. Yes, when 50% of people are alive. When 50% of people are alive. So this is called as median survival. So you can have these 3 questions from this particular diagram. Yes. Now the next question which can come over here is they add treatment to it. Suppose they give a treatment where at the end 50% of people are surviving. So here comes the fourth question. Here comes the fourth question. Benefit of therapy. Benefit of treatment. So the benefit of treatment, as you can see over here, is 50%. Yes. So these are the 4 questions which you can expect from this particular diagram. From this particular diagram. Yes. Done. Over. Okay. Now let us look into this question. The examiners always are ready to trick you. In this question you can see in the treatment group the survival is less. in the control group, the survival is more, which means this treatment is a toxin or a poison. Because generally we have that Pavlov's dog experiment working in our mind where we think whatever has been given in the question would show improvement. But over here there is no improvement. You can see it over here. Yes. So in the treatment, the survival lowers down. Yes, which means it is a toxin which is leading to more deaths. Yes. Done. Okay. Now let us look into these two diagrams. The next topic comes over here. These are two diagrams for meta-analysis. Now what is meta-analysis? See, suppose I have to write a note on myocardial infarction. I take Robbins pathology, Harrison, Davidson, Matthew, and one of my seniors' note. And then I squeeze them and I bring out another note. That is meta-analysis and systematic review. Now in this, there are two images which you can get in your exam. One is a forest plot. Now this plot is nothing different from the concept of confidence intervals which are taught to you in statistics. Now I hope you know it. The null value is 1. So study by Smith et al. Is insignificant. Study by Jones and again Smith et al. Are insignificant. Whereas the study by NG et al. And Chu et al. Are significant. Next, look at the point estimate. The point estimate for NG et al. Is away from the null value. So it is most significant as compared to Chu et al. Yes. Now you know this. So what is more in this forest plot is this diamond. This diamond gives you the cumulative estimate taking into account the sample size and the statistical significance. So over here you can see it is roughly 2.1, which is visible over here as the cumulative estimate. This diagram is called as forest plot. This diagram is basically used to give you a insight into the statistical estimate of the entire meta-analysis. Now another diagram is a funnel plot. You can see a funnel shaped structure is built. Over here there is an outlier study. Yes, this funnel plot basically tells you about publication bias. You know, majority of the journals love to publish only results which have got positive findings or significant findings. They never ever publish results which have negative findings. Yes, so they avoid this form of bias. So this is publication bias seen on a funnel plot. Yes. Okay. Now let's come to the next topic. Types of RCT, randomized control trials. The very basic one to understand first is the difference between randomization and blinding. See, people rapidly say double blind randomized control trial and they think it is same. There is a huge difference, my dear students. Randomization removes selection bias. Blinding removes interviewer bias. Now, the selection bias occurs at the time of recruitment, and that is the reason randomization is done before recruitment. Whereas interviewer bias occurs at the time of data collection. So blinding is done before the data collection is done. Yes, done. So let us see what is a parallel RCT, the very basic and simple RCT. Suppose there are 100 patients of cancer. I took a lottery and divided them into 50-50. This is called as random. Now imagine if I would have made the choice who will go to this 50 and who will go to the other 50, then it would have been non-random. Yes. Now this 50 goes to A, this 50 goes to B. Now I and the patient do not have idea what is A and what is B. So this is double blind. Now imagine I know A is treatment and B is placebo, and also the patient knows. So this is un or non-blind or a open trial. This is a specific simple depiction of double-blind randomized controlled trial. But there is a problem with this study. Look, this 50 people are suffering from cancer and you have given them placebo. So basically you have cheated them, because they expected and they became a part of the study because they wanted to get the treatment, but you gave them a placebo. So this is unethical. So these days we say, in case of a parallel RCT, there are ethical issues involved. And that is the reason we now see another type, a planned crossover RCT. This removes ethical issues because every participant will get both the interventions, but this is only possible in few cases. You cannot do it in cases where surgery or some kind of interventional therapy is there. Yes. So what will we do? We'll have 100 people, divide into 50 and 50. Suppose for 1 month they form the experimental group and they form the control group. After this, there is a specified washout period. Suppose that is 15 days. Now, what do I mean by washout period? It is the period when the action of the drug ceases from the body. Yes. So, after giving 1 month of this therapy, you go for a washout period and now switch. Yes. That you give them a planned crossover. Now, so this 50 have become the control group, whereas this 50 have become the experimental group. This is what is called as a planned crossover RCT. Now let us look into another type, the factorial RCT. This is a unique RCT where at the same RCT we have two unrelated interventions being tested. What did I say? Two unrelated interventions being checked. Yes. So over here you can see we have aspirin, beta carotene. In the cell A, patient gets both the drug. Over here, neither the drug. In cell 2, only beta carotene. In cell 3, aspirin. So this gives you an advantage of doing two researches at one go. This is possible only if the two drugs do not have any form of interaction. Because if they have any form of interaction, then you would not be able to do this research at all. Yes. Okay. Now look into this diagram. There's a huge crisscross. I would explain this to you. Yes. Now this is an unplanned crossover which routinely happens in the day-to-day phenomenon. Let us look into this. Yes. Just wait. Now what is this unplanned crossover? Suppose there are 100 patients with cancer. You randomize them into 50 chemo and 50 radio, or let us say 50 surgery. Out of this, 5 become serious and require an urgent surgery, whereas 10 refuse the surgery. They say we will not go for surgery, we would prefer to go for a chemo. So this will be 50 chemo plus 10 minus 5. So we have 55 people getting chemo and 45 people getting surgery. So you can see there has been a unplanned crossover available. over here we have an unplanned crossover. We did not plan this. Now over here there works two types of analysis. One is called as intention to treat. So what was my intention to treat? 50 chemo, 50 surgery. So if I am planning to have such kind of intention and I analyze it like that, it will be called intention to treat. Per protocol analysis, 55 chemo and 45 surgery. So this says the protocol as per the actual treatment received we would be providing the analysis. Yes, but the net motto is no patient is left out. Yes, so intention to treat, once randomized, always analyzed. Per protocol is 45 analysis. Intention to treat is 50 analysis. So in this, the randomization is never ever affected. This is the best because we should avoid such kinds of jump, but practically this becomes not possible. Now what are the different forms of questions which were thrown to you in AIIMS already? Now there were 3 versions of the same question, but the answer was same. Baseline characteristics are similar in both arms. Yes, for RCT it is very important. The investigator bias is removed by blinding. We saw it. Third, the sample size depends upon hypothesis. Yes, it depends upon it. Dropout should be excluded. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Same these two options. Sample size depends on type of study. Yes, if it is observational, the formula is 4PQ by D square. For RCT, there's a huge complex formula. Yes. The third variant of this question was double blinding removes investigator bias. Yes. Randomization is the most important part of our RCT. Yes. The first step of an RCT is to draw a protocol. Yes. Dropouts are excluded from the study. No. Yes. So what are the different forms of question? You can get a question like this. You can get a question on intention to treat per protocol analysis, or you can get a question on the types of different RCT. Yes. Done. Over. Okay, so now let us look into the next topic. Yes, where I would like to draw a comparison between a cohort and a RCT and also the calculations related to it. Okay, so suppose there is a population and we divide this into exposed and non-exposed. Similarly, we have a population over here where we divide them into exposed and non-exposed. Now, suppose this is a cohort. This is a RCT. How do I differentiate between these two? This is random. This is non-random. Yes. Now, this is having an intervention. Now let me clarify. Even cohort has an intervention. Even cohort has an intervention. The only difference in these two is in cohort there is a natural intervention and in RCT there is an artificial intervention. Now students find it difficult to understand what do I mean over here, but it is very simple. See, suppose I apply on this cheek, yes, the cream of milk, yes, malai, which we say in Hindi, malai, yes, and on this cheek I am applying a Dove cream and I am comparing. This is a natural intervention, this is an artificial intervention. Yes. Now I eat lot of fresh fruits and vegetables, natural intervention. Yes, I consume vitamin E capsules, omega 3 or omega-6 fatty acids capsules, that is artificial interventions. Yes. So I hope you get the picture. What do I mean by artificial and natural intervention? Now in cohort, we have a 2 by 2 table, A, B, C, D. Exposed, non-exposed, diseased, non-diseased. Now let me tell you, in RCT also, we have the same 2 by 2 table, only the labelings will change. Exposure means over here treatment, non-exposed means no treatment. So over here it will be cured because we are giving a treatment, over here it is not cure. So technically speaking, you will have the same 2 by 2 table whether it be a cohort or an RCT. Now in case of a cohort, we calculate attributable risk as incidence in exposed minus incidence in non-exposed. In RCT, we have absolute risk reduction, which is ARR, which is incidence in non-exposed minus incidence in exposed. Yes. Here we calculate something called as NNT. Here we calculate something called as NNT. Yes, which is 1 divided by absolute risk reduction. 1 divided by absolute risk reduction. Yes. Fine. Okay. Now, what is NNT? It is number needed to treat. That is number of people who are needed to be treated to provide benefit to one patient. Similarly, over here we have proportion attributable risk, incidence in exposed minus incidence in non-exposed by incidence in exposed. Here we have something called as relative risk reduction, which is RRR. This is incidence in non-exposed minus incidence in exposed divided by incidence in non-exposed. So you can see RCT and cohort are almost having a similar 2 by 2 table, or rather I should say the same 2 by 2 table, but the formulas are interpreted in a different manner. So AIIMS went ahead to ask you this question, which while testing this particular outcome came, what would be the ARR and RRR? Now first and foremost, look at the table. Drug is exposed or treatment. This is non-exposed or no treatment. So first googly which AIIMS played with you was to inverse the table. The second googly, number of people affected. So this is A, this is C. They did not give you B and D, but they give you A plus B and C plus D. Yes. So we will now rearrange this table. Treatment, no treatment, 1603, 1804, yes, 15225, 15224. So absolute risk reduction would be 1804 by 15224 minus 1603 by 15225. Yes, so the only play was to rearrange the table. The only play over here was to rearrange the table. If you would have seen this question was very, very simple if you would have known this theory. Yes. So just a year back, AIIMS had asked this particular question to the students. Okay. Now, let us now go to the next topic, that is the third factor. Now, what do I mean by third factor? A cause or an exposure is leading to the disease. An exposure is leading to the disease. Now there can be a number of third factors: confounder, effect modifier, mediator, collinearity. Now at your level, we don't expect you to know the mediator or the collinearity. Now what is a confounder? A confounder has to be associated with the exposure and disease both. Whereas an effect modifier, which is also called as an interactor, it has to only and only be related to the disease. It has to be only and only related to the disease. It need not be related to the exposure. Now let me give you a simple example. In 1940, rich USA coffee drinker were largely diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Yes, due to this, the coffee industry of USA and the chocolate industry, the coffee and chocolate industries both have lots of coffee used in USA, but totally bankrupt. And people thought, what is the major thing? Because they used to consume coffee for like millennium. Yes, but suddenly the coffee was brought into a very big problem. Now after almost a decade, they realized it is not the coffee, it is the smoking. You must have seen in Hollywood movies, they would smoke and drink the coffee together. They would smoke and drink the coffee together. So it was the smoking which was responsible for the pancreatic cancer and not the coffee. But the original pathway in 1940s would have been something like this. Yes, so the smoking acts as a confounder over here. Okay. Now, effect modifier. Imagine there is a person who stays in a asbestos house. He or she would have lung cancer. Now, suppose he is also a smoker, the risk of lung cancer would go up. So this is a positive effect modifier. But does this mean that that person would also stay in an asbestos house? Absolutely not. So this is the basic difference of a confounder from an effect modifier, where the effect modifier is related only to the outcome. Now let me give you another example. Unprotected intercourse would lead to HIV. Circumcision would lead to decreased risk of HIV. But this does not mean that a circumscribed person would undergo an unprotected intercourse. A circumscribed person would go for unprotected intercourse. Yes, done. I hope it is clear. Yes, okay. So the first thing is they never come in the causal pathway. Now what is the causal pathway? Exposure to disease. You could see neither the effect modifier, neither the confounder were coming in between the two. They were separate. Yes, confounder is related with both, effect modifier is only associated with outcome. Confounder is found unequally distributed. Yes, and has got a independent effect in causation of outcome. Now this cannot be shown to you on the image, just remember it. Yes, okay. Now what are the different methods in which we can control confounding? Randomization, most ideal. Now why? Because it removes both known and unknown confounder. It removes both known and unknown confounder. Yes. Now matching, this is used in case of case control studies only because it removes the known confounders. Restriction is another method, need not get into it. Stratification I would explain you in detail because that is what AIIMS asks. There is one more, modeling. So you can get a multiple true false question over here in the new pattern of AIIMS where they can ask which of the following is not a method, or they can ask you arrange in sequence which is the best or worst. Yes, okay. So let us see the theoretical background to this. Now, whenever we do a research and we get an association, the first question is there an association or not? Suppose my answer is yes, there is an association, then this association is due to third factor or a real association. Now, if it is due to a third factor, I can determine whether it is a confounder or effect modifier by stratification by third factor. Now, what is stratification? Division. So if the confounder or the third factor is smoking, I would remove smokers in one group and have non-smokers in other groups. So I'll divide them. And after division, I would see the effect in smoker and I would see the effect in non-smoker. Now, if the effect is equal, it is a confounder. If the effect is different, it is a effect modifier. If the effect is different, it is a effect modifier. So let me see. In this example, I am taking coffee drinking and pancreatic cancer. So when the odds ratio was calculated, it came out to be 1.9. Now 1.9 odds ratio means coffee is leading to pancreatic cancer. Yes. But when I stratified, that is a divided by the smoking habit. Yes. I got smokers on one aspect and non-smokers on the other hand. Now in smoker, I could see the odds ratio to be 1. In non-smoker, I could see the odds ratio to be 1. So in both, the odds ratio was 1. And I had taught you, if it is a confounder, it will be equal in both groups. Yes. So the inference is, which I initially saw as 1.9 is actually 1, which means it may be due to smoking. So let us see a question on this. A study revealed that a study group where intake of beta carotene decreases the CA colon, but it actually may be due to increased intake of dietary fiber. So we are seeing there is a third factor playing up. So it is a confounder. It is a confounder, straight away question. Or you can get a question, where they can give you a question where they can say that in one group the effect was 1.9, whereas in the other group the effect was 0.9. So this will become a effect modifier. It would be a confounder if in both the groups it is 1 each. If in both the groups it is 1 each. Yes, I hope this is absolutely clear. So these were some 8 topics of epidemiology. This is the part 1 of your AIIMS capsule. Yes, I hope it is absolutely clear. Yes. So I end this part over here. Yes. So for new pattern of AIIMS questions, you just go to the DAMS Club and follow this particular hashtag. You would be getting the answers to it. Yes. So thank you. This is the end of the part 1 of your AIIMS capsule. Yes.